Hello and welcome to the Dark Side. We are your hosts, Tabitha Purple and the Coming Storm. We are so glad that you tune in each week and listen to our show and discover, develop, and discuss new ideas, maybe some older ideas, but we're trying to develop thought and action. We're action-based in this space. So we had a week's break, feeling refreshed.
Yeah.
This is the life of working people. When we do this voluntarily, huh? So we don't get paid to be on here doing the dark side. We just love educating you and being with you. So of course we have day jobs, night jobs, and children and other things that we do in the meantime. So we would like to wrap up the report from the Met Police. So it was a report out of the Metropolitan Police in the UK, and we would like to wrap up and kind of cover some final points out of this. We have a warm drink. Oh, I'm getting one of those afterwards. But before we get there, we're going to just touch on a couple of news stories, and I want to touch on a news story that's actually not a news story, if that makes sense. So I sent this to you earlier. It's a horrible situation out of the USA. A young boy by the name of Ralph Yarl is in critical condition in hospital. Ralph was going to pick up his siblings from a play date, and he got the address wrong. He knocked on the door of someone who was not obviously the people that he was supposed to be at, and very innocent mistake for a young man to do. And this person took one look at him, shot him through the door, opened the door, and then shot him in his head to ensure that he's dead. By some miraculous reason, this young man is still alive. I can't even understand how. But the shooter has not been arrested. So I'm imploring upon all of our people, there is actions online. If you go onto some very prominent accounts, you will see how to contact the police there, how to do that. I think it's important to actually support this family. You rang the wrong doorbell and you got shot twice to be murdered, because there's no other reason that you would shoot someone in the head once you've already shot them once and they're lying on the ground. It's a horrific crime, and there is a grieving family. He's 16 years old. He is a child, and he has been attempted murder, because of course he's still alive at the very least. I don't even know what to say. The people have lost their minds. The police are not doing their jobs. There is just a catalogue of I can't understand how this happens situations, but that is it really struck me today and hit me in my chest that this child made a mistake. I've made a mistake. I'm sure my children will make in the future. And it's just going and ringing on the wrong doorbell. What I do for a living takes me all over the country that I live in and ring on various doorbells. And I have stood in that nervous position going, I hope this is the right house, but never once have I thought that I could be shot as a result of that. And this family are grieving, are experiencing the worst days of their lives, because that's exactly the story that happened to their son. And what was his crime? Ringing on a doorbell of the wrong house. No crime. Making an innocent child mistake at 16. What can a black child do and be safe with? Certainly isn't ringing a doorbell. Mr. Storm.
It's not the first time this has happened.
No, they're citing stand your ground laws, but of course you can't stand your ground if somebody just rings on your doorbell and you shoot them twice, once in the head. What were you standing your ground against? The doorbell? Like, what exactly are you?
Look, the reality is, they're citing stand your ground laws because the laws were specifically designed to get white people away with murder, right? And people be like, but this is the law, anybody can use it. Well, I think you need to look at the statistics who successfully gets to use stand your ground laws and who doesn't, because the statistics on it are very telling, right? The percentage of successful Black people that can assert stand your ground is very, very low. And there have been cases of people being shot at and shooting back and not being allowed stand your ground as a defense. There have been cases of people shooting warning shots and they haven't been able to successfully use stand your ground laws as a defense. And then you look at some of the cases in which white people have managed to successfully do it, where they have shot unarmed Black people, unarmed Black people that were actually trying to get away, right? The Trayvon Martin is perhaps the most famous one, but there are countless other Trayvon Martins in the US. So anybody who thinks that these laws weren't designed with a purpose in mind, it needs to go and do some research into who gets to use them and who doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, today we're tackling policing in the UK, and particularly within the Metropolitan Police. But there is a systemic worldwide problem with how policing is done. We were watching we were actually watching a show involving police the other day, and I think I said to you, it's almost shocking how you then begin to see, the blinders fall off of the propaganda of what it means to break the rules, of what it means to be a police officer, how these things are portrayed, and how much of that feeds into then a narrative in which police can get away with almost anything, including not filing charges against people who clearly need to have charges filed against them, not arresting them, not investigating, not doing anything. And there is at the center of this is a 16-year-old child. It is a little boy whose family, I can't even imagine what the emotions, the weight, the pain of that, and I can't imagine that in his moments of consciousness, those moments of consciousness before this happened, he was just going to pick up his siblings.
Yeah, look,
he's on an errand for his parents, just go pick up your siblings and then bring them home. We'll have dinner, da da da. The usual. Just a really mundane, normal conversation. And this person felt so affronted by the presence of a child that they not only shot them through a window, I believe it was, but came to shoot them in the head to make sure that there was no, how
look, the reality is that the police are racist. I'm just going to straight out. I haven't met them. I don't need to meet them to know that you're racist and you're incompetent. Because here's the thing: you cannot, to the best of my knowledge, make a veil of stand your ground laws if there is something in between you, if there is a barrier in between you, right?
Like a whole entire house.
Like a whole entire house, right? The other thing is, even if you wanted to, you could not go up and then execute someone, right? So you've already shot the person, they're on the ground, wounded, unarmed, and you walk up to them, shoot them in the head. That's an execution. Right? But look, the police in the US, as we are going to find out with the Met, are out of control. I mean, a Black Secret Service agent just got paid in the US $750,000 this week because he was stopped twice by the same cops on the same night within minutes. Now, the funny thing is, he was actually on duty and he was meant to be providing protection for the Secretary for Homeland Defense.
I'm
And
sorry, he's at work.
he's at work. Police officer comes up. Basically, he gives him his badge, gives him his gun, everything. They take it from him, detain him, tell him shut the F up, all sorts of stuff like this. His supervisor, he's on the phone, so his supervisor hears everything that's going on. His supervisor tells him, no, he's at work, he's on duty, explains everything. They finally let him go. And then literally within minutes, the same cops stop him again.
You can't make this up. What and here's so there are so many chillingly problematic.
No, I haven't finished the story.
Oh God, there's worse.
Right? So the officer that stopped him initially called us back up and then stopped him again. Right? Let's put it like this. It appears as though it was retaliation because said police officer got into a fight outside a bar, and this about a year or so prior. And this Secret Service agent was the first law enforcement person on scene. He got flagged down by people calling for help. So he was the first law enforcement officer on scene. Police officer was initially charged, but the charges were dropped. I wonder why, right? And so when you look at this, it looks clearly to be retaliation.
Can I just say the irony of this being that we now have evidence that they can tell the difference between Black people? Sorry, continue on with your story.
Right. So yeah, that's the story. So you have police officers, and these police officers, they have this Homeland Security officer has just won $750,000, right? Police officers are still on the force.
How is this even a thing?
So they were found guilty of violating his civil rights.
How is this even a thing?
And they are still on the police force. In other words, the police over there, we're happy to violate people's rights, and we'll just pay the money.
It just, the really sad thing about this is, of course, the person who's on the receiving end of your criminal actions, because it's criminal actions, your crime, is actually trying to protect someone else. So if you're creating an environment in which you leave someone who's a third party completely vulnerable, you're not allowing this person to do their job. All that trauma, there's all the trauma that goes with what these police officers are trying to do. But this impacts so many people, and you're still employed. And people argue, okay, but if you're, it's a rigged system. The structures are there to help people and get the best. Nonsense. Because if you're Black, these structures only work one way up. Clearly, you could be connected all the way to the president. Not making no difference. It's not making no difference.
I just find it pretty ironic that the Secret Service agent who is meant to be protecting the Secretary for Homeland Security, right, is being terrorized, is a victim of terrorism by the police. That's what you can't make up in all of this. This terrorism taking place, but it's by the police.
You just can't make that up. And anyway, the police still get to keep their job, which it almost says that the system legally endorses it. Like we legally endorse what you're doing. We'll pay the little rap on the hand, no problem, because we're going to take that money out of the pockets of the citizens of that state and pay it to these people. It's no problem. We don't have to feel anything. It's not coming out of my paycheck. In fact, I'm still getting my paycheck. All right, let's get on to our main story for today, or our main educational moments. We have been talking about the report out of the Met Police. Now I have to actually get up all of the names again. But we've been talking about the report out of the Metropolitan Police by, oh gosh, now where is it? I have my report in front of me. What is her name again?
Casey? Baroness
There
Casey?
you go. Baroness Casey's report out of the Metropolitan Police. This was done in March 2023. It's a 400-some page report. It's an independent review into the standards of behavior and internal culture of the Metropolitan Police. The final report was commissioned in response to the case of, why are names failing me today? The woman that was assaulted by the police officer, killed. Name's gone. Anyway, it was done in response to that case. If you can help me with names at any point, please do. But what Baroness Casey does is she takes a really wide lens, embeds herself within the Met Police for over a year, and actually researches all aspects of prejudice, racism, gender discrimination, homophobic, transphobic, and all of the different types of problems that the Met Police are having, from structural employment to managerial, all the way through to everyday incidents on the ground. The report is shocking. I've read quite a bit of it now, thanks to Mr. Storm. He's read the 400 pages. I've read quite a bit. Slight difference. We've gone over this quite a bit in detail, and so far we have covered the introductory elements of what the report really concludes. It's institutionally racist, it's institutionally sexist, and it is institutionally homophobic, or sexuality. How do we describe that now? I can't think of the term. It has institutional structural problems at its foundation, and therefore the system is corrupt, is the best way. Baroness Casey herself has done a lot of interviews that you can look up, and as we have said before, please do take the time. I know a 400-page report seems daunting, but please do take the time to at least listen to some of the summaries she's given in interviews, because I think it gives you a scope of what she's saying. This report comes 20 years after the Stephen Lawrence case and the reports that came out of that describing the Met Police as institutionally racist. And within that report, what Baroness Casey says is that they didn't even go far enough. She felt he was tame compared to what she actually says. She felt that report was the mild version. What she seems to be the most frustrated with is that instead of dealing with the issues at hand in the report, which we have discussed at length here, and we'll continue to round up these last issues that we want to bring out, what people have decided is the sticking issue is to say something is institutionally racist or sexist or prejudiced in any way. And she finds it abhorrent that instead of dealing with the issues at hand, what you're doing is you're having an argument over language. The fact that the current head of the Met Police says there are incidents of these problems, but by no means is we wouldn't describe the police as having an institutional problem, a systemic issue, leads me to conclude that this will not change. And it is Baroness Casey's fear, and I've heard her say this a few times, that someone will come back and do a report and do an investigation, because there will be a heinous crime again against a person of color, or a woman, or a person on the LGBTQIA spectrum, or some human being will be suffering, or a child, and we will be forced to do a report, and nothing will have changed. And you can honestly say that it sounds like that if the head of the organization says, I don't really see what she's saying.
Yeah, we'll come on to that. But what I just want to inject here, actually, because I think it's an important point, is that Casey goes further than what you said. She says, in a few years, do another review. And if nothing has changed, to scrap the Metropolitan Police. It is not fit for
fit for
It's
purpose.
not fit for purpose, and it
Mhm.
cannot be reformed.
Yeah.
So scrap it. And I think in doing so, I think she tells you truly what her beliefs are, because an institution of that size, to turn its course and to be able to make meaningful changes within the
Mm,
space of 5 years is almost impossible,
mm, yeah.
right? And to set that challenge of 5 years, she's actually telling the police and politicians, okay, now's the time to put your money where your mouth is,
Oh,
because
yeah.
to do it in 5 years, you need to do a lot of hard work. This needs to be intentional. So I think she goes further than anyone else has gone before. Um, and
Your kind of person.
absolutely burn it to the ground and start again.
Not again. Well, I just wanted to say, so we have 3 episodes on this now. So please, if you're watching this one and you haven't watched the previous one, can I implore you, if you really are interested in understanding the report without reading 400 pages, then please do go back to the beginning, because they cover the issues. The first episode is generally empathetic towards the situation, because Casey's report lays out the austerity situation at the Met Police, how they're being stripped of funding, how they were stripped of excessive numbers of police. They don't have the resources in some ways, and so there's a whole chapter of her report that's dedicated to this issue. We spent some time talking about the real problematic systemic issues that the Met Police face on a daily basis, and police officers are facing, and how heinous that situation is. However, that does not overshadow any of the problems that comes next. Is one chapter, one episode of our podcast that we do here on the Dark Side, where we cover that issue. And I think we wanted to handle it as fairly as Casey has tried to handle it as well. She has tried to put forward both sides of the story. So please do go back and look at that. In the next episode, we then run into the difficulties that she encountered and the problems. And there are 2 sides to this story that we covered in the last edition, which is, one is how they internally treat one another. So you have this systemic problem that is not only affecting the people that they should be serving, but actually as employees, they treat one another in vile and horrid ways. The people that work there are going through hell. And by that, I mean anyone of color, anyone of female or other gender persuasion, anyone who is gay or on any kind of um, LGBTQIA spectrum. The list is endless of those people who are suffering within their own ranks, and it is not being dealt with. So there's that aspect. And then we moved on. Mr. Storm took us very smoothly into, and this is how, if you have that internal problem, how it comes out on the people that you serve. And so you are supposed to be policing by consent. And we spoke a lot about what policing by consent looks like. And in this case, policing by consent is not happening at all because of the mechanism of how the policing is done. So if you want to have a deep dive into those issues, please do go back and have a look at that as we round up some of the other big issues that maybe, we can just hit a few of them to highlight for you things that you need to think about in when you're talking about a report of this nature, and how the media is portraying it versus what actually sits in the substance of the report. Without further ado, I'm just going to be quiet now and let Mr. Storm take it away.
Right. So, I'm noticing the time, so we're probably going to have to jog on through this. So,
hit the big things that we have to look at. Just point us in the right direction, Mr. Storm.
Listen, we're about to deal with racism in the Met. There's no skipping, right? So, some of the things that we've spoken about before is that the Met Police is not reflective of the population of London, right? 50% of the population of London identifies as being non-white. Okay. Yeah, the Met Police, I can't remember the exact figure, but it's a small minority. So you can't meet or understand the community you serve if you're not reflective of that community, if you don't come from within that community. Oh, back in 1999, McPherson speaks of the distrust between the police, or the Met Police, and the community it was meant to serve. Baroness Casey says this distrust, well, it's still there. Nothing has changed. Now, the problem is the Met refused to accept this assessment, right? They refused to accept that the McPherson report outcome and findings that they are institutionally racist. Well, I think this is problematic because when the doctor tells you you have cancer, and you tell the doctor, I disagree with your diagnosis, so I'm not actually going to go through with the treatment that you've said, and everything's fine. Well, guess what happens? You're going to die of cancer. Cancer's going to spread and you're going to die. The Met Police have not done enough since the McPherson report and pretty much ignore it. So I am going to give you a quote from Cressida Dick, who was the previous police commissioner, explain to you the attitudes that they have towards racism. Okay. This is a quote she made in 2021. Since the McPherson report was published, there have been important improvements in policing, including significant improvements in the policing of racist crimes, in the commitments made to promoting equality and diversity, and in good examples of local community policing. Go back and see episode 1, and you'll find why that comment about local community policing is so funny, right? She then goes on to say, but our inquiry has also identified persistent, deep-rooted, and unjustified racial disparities in key areas. Oh, sorry, no, this isn't Cressida Dick. This is the Home Affairs Select Committee on the McPherson report 22 years on, right? In 2020. Sorry. So they say, but our inquiry has identified persistent, deep-rooted, and unjustified racial disparities in key areas, including a confidence gap for BME, that's Black minority ethnic communities, lack of progress on BME recruitment, problems in misconduct proceedings, and unjustified racial disparities in stop and search. What I mean. So, what does Cressida Dick come out and do? She comes out and she says, I do not recognize this. What she says is, we have come an enormous way. I say to other people that if you want to call us institutionally racist, that is a matter for you, but it is not a label I find helpful, as I have told this committee before. We are not collectively failing in all the ways described in Sir William's definition. There is no collective failure. It is not a massive systemic problem. It is not institutionalized. Now,
and she's basing that on what exact facts?
Right. So now,
but
what you need to bear in mind is, is that she says it's not helpful. She's now the ex-police commissioner. In comes Mark Rowley, the new police commissioner. And he says, I don't find this term helpful. To call the police institutionally racist, he says, I do not find it helpful. I do not find that it reflects the police force that I know. What I am going to do is, for anyone who has seen the first episode, think back to the question I asked in the first episode. For those that haven't seen it, what I'm going to say to you is this. You need to ask yourself a question. And that is considering that this report plus the Macpherson report found the police to be institutionally racist, and the police commissioners do not find this term helpful. Okay. You don't find, or they don't find it helpful. Okay. Ask yourself this question. Why did they not say the same in regards to being labeled institutionally homophobic and institutionally sexist?
Certainly when it comes to race, then we don't find it helpful, but the others, you're not jumping up and down to talk about that, are you? No. Interesting.
Right?
Anyway, food for thought.
So I'm just saying you have to understand that
Mhm, mhm,
what I'm saying to you is that the problems or the issues regarding race
mhm,
within policing, if you're saying that I don't find this term helpful when somebody says to you it's a problem and it exists,
mhm,
and multiple people are finding the same problems
mhm,
over and over again, and you
mhm,
say, I don't find it helpful to say this, then what you're tacitly saying is that the racism within policing is a
mm.
feature and not a bug,
Yep.
right?
This is how we're
Mhm.
supposed to be.
When you say
Mhm, mhm,
this, and when you say, and when you're silent, and you have to take it in conjunction with the fact that they're silent when it
mm,
comes to being labeled institutionally homophobic and institutionally sexist.
mhm,
Okay, we'll stay silent on that. That's a helpful term. We shouldn't be sexist. We shouldn't be homophobic. Those terms we find helpful. What is it you don't find helpful?
mm. Yeah.
Right. So, um, sorry.
Just say hello to one of our viewers here. Hi, Sanjana.
Hi,
Thank you for
Santana.
joining.
Right. So the Met. So I just gave you the quote from Cressida Dick,
Mm,
and it stems back to one of the problems which Casey identified and we touched on in a previous episode, and that is that the Met is not able to realistically and objectively assess itself.
mm,
Right. And part of that comes back to systemic issues, structural issues,
mm,
lack of funding issues, um, as well as the culture that exists
mm,
within the Met. Okay. So why is there this pervasive persistence? I'm just trying to get on through. So why is there this pervasive persistence of racism in the Met? So we've mentioned lack of diversity, right?
mm.
Um, Now, Cressida Dick said, "Hey, we've made leaps and bounds." The select committee that I spoke about said, "Hey, they've made improvements." Well, to be fair, the select committee said they've made improvements, but you're still failing, right? Um,
Let's be fair to what they actually said.
right. But what's going on is that this lack of diversity, and on
Mhm,
its current trajectory, the Met will not reach 46% Black, Asian, and ethnic minority police force.
mhm,
Okay, for another 40 years, right? So, and that's assuming that people don't leave. Okay?
And it's to be noted that she includes within her report a number of employment tribunal cases, etc. So when he says that, he literally means that assumes that there are not so many of those things happening, considering that they're all in the report already, and these are the structural issues.
Right. Um, and Casey goes on to note and say that look, the Met has no plans in place to address the fact that on your current trajectory, it's going to take you 40 years to reach these
Mm,
targets, in
mm,
which your police force will be reflective of your population.
mm,
It leads me to once again say, if you're not planning to address this, once again, it is not a bug in the system, right?
mhm,
Um, the Met then mistreats black officers and holds them to a higher standard and harsher penalties if these standards are missed than white officers. Okay, so we're talking about racism within the Met and how the Met are then racist to the community after that. So black police officers are 81% more likely to be targets of a misconduct case than a white officer. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, I think that a lot of black people, police officers, need their heads checked. Right? And no, to be honest, I find them to be I'm trying to think of a word that will be acceptable on YouTube. Let me phrase it like this. I find them to be male sexual organs. Right?
Okay, so the anecdotal evidence, because of course this is not your scientific part.
But
your experience of police officers of color is that there is something amiss or I would say it like this: in order to function in an environment in which you are not wanted, you are actively abused, and you are actively sought to be rid of, like they're actively seeking to get rid of you all the time. There has to be a level of cognitive dissonance to survive that environment. Like you're not going to be healthy individual in an environment that is set up. So even if you go in with your because by accounts of the report, if you look at the police officers, they may go in feeling fresh and wonderful and have ideals, but the system itself is so flawed and so failing and so pervasively abusive that will all come to nothing.
Yeah, look, I think that's part of what's at play. And I think the other part of what is at play is respectability politics.
Okay.
And so what you're having now is that black police officers feel, hey, if black people just act a certain way, behave a certain way, then they wouldn't have so many issues with the police. Never mind the fact that black youth are acting just like white youth, doing the same things as white youth. What then happens is that these black officers then tend to hold black youth to a higher standard, because not only do they buy into this respectability politics, but it reflects on them as black people as well. If a black person does something, then, look, how does this reflect on me? You don't have your individuality. You're not allowed your individuality in that way. So I think it's more than just what you say at play in terms of the system. I think, this is also societal issues, individual issues, different things going on at play.
Well, I mean, but that is part and parcel of it, right? It's not just one or other. These are all aspects that play into what is the end result. But anyway, let's get back to the case at hand.
Right. So, yeah, they're 81% more likely to be under a misconduct charge. So, of course, you hit the black police officers up with misconduct charges more often. You're able to ship them out easier, right? Get rid of them easier. And we already spoke about during the recruitment process how black cadets will be treated more harshly and subject. I've forgotten what the procedure was called, but it's a procedure basically to get rid of them during training. Okay. So black and Asian cadets are more likely to be subject to getting rid of during the training. Casey then goes on to note that there is under protection of black communities by the Met Police. And I think this is an important thing to note, because at the same time you're having the under protection, you're having over policing. right? And so what's happening is that in these communities, and what she means by under protection is you're not protecting the community from violent crimes, right? What you are doing is over policing them on minor things. You're stopping and searching them for no reason. You're making their daily life a problem, right? And so I think it's actually very important that we look into this under protection aspect. I will say, especially within London, this does play in greatly in regards to the majority of poor areas in London are going to be communities of color, right? But I think class does play a massive role in this under protecting of communities, because you go into Mayfair and you look out of place, you will get stopped.
Yep.
Right. And I say this from experience, you know.
Well, I think for people who don't know the geography of London, I think it's really important to note that it's not in the segregated way that you have the geography of the US, right? So you the mixing of people is really in some ways ironic. You know, you can have a housing estate here, which is with the low income families, people, etc. And then, you know, 2 streets over, you're into a neighborhood in which the houses can cost upward of ridiculous amounts of money. And so, for example, in an area that I grew up in, you know, you're surrounded at any one moment by wealth and poverty. They work hand in hand, and the idea that they are the communities are predominantly one way is because of the flight system. So that's a whole different podcast on how people actually moved out of areas, etc. But you know, it's not so obvious as a United States system. It does have that, but for example, you know, if you get a job, if you live in Hackney and you're working in the West End, these areas are, you're traveling through Liverpool Street, you're traveling through affluent areas to get to business areas to get to your job and back again. So the idea that the underserving of police is so important, because what happens is such a horrible effect for the everyday person. In your community, if you are in trouble, you don't get anything. But as you travel on your journey, you're being stopped, you're being searched, you're being harassed by police officers to your workplace, and then on the way back, the same thing. And so it becomes this real problem of these areas are not far apart. The where people work are not far apart, but you're literally walking from a place where you are not safe to a place where you are not safe for 2 different reasons. One, because the police don't come, and the other one because the police come too frequently. Like, not just racially profiling, etc. So I just wanted to, for people who are not familiar with London, that's just a very short, very, very short example of what's happening.
So what then happens is that this under protecting, over policing, what this will then do is that it makes communities of color less likely to join the police. This is the in a nutshell, as I said, mindful of time. In a nutshell, this is what, you know, they're going to be more reluctant to join the police because they don't trust them. They don't see the point of it. So it's going to make it harder for you to reach your targets. Once again, if you are aware of this and you are doing nothing to change it, it will be suggestive that this is intentional. Okay. And the fact that once you identify problem after problem after problem that leads you to the same conclusion, and you're refusing to change anything, well, you're left with only one possible conclusion, and that is that all of this is intentional. So since 2010, surprisingly though, the number of self-identifying Asian and Black police officers has increased by 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7%. 7 So it went up from 10% to 17%.
Mhm.
Okay, that's taken what, 12 and a half years,
Mhm.
13 years for that to happen.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, by contrast, London is 49% Black and Asian. Okay. Um, what has happened though is that although it's been a relatively small increase by proportion to the community of 7%, because of the racist environment, when Black and Asian police officers manage to get through the racist cadet procedure and
Mhm.
become officers, they are then met with racism from their colleagues because they're told they're a diversity hire,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? That they're only there because they're Black or Asian.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I'm going to go out and say women are getting the same thing.
Mhm.
And if you're openly gay, you're getting the same thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, now, what then occurs is that because people are saying that these officers are diversity hires, these Black and Asian officers then get blamed for fallen standards because you're only there because of your skin color. You're not actually qualified to do the job, right? Um, let me just find the page in the report because I believe I have a quote. Um, right. So, what has then happened is that this view that has emerged and that they're only there because of diversity, higher standards have dropped, has been allowed to grow and fester, that it is even held at senior level.
Hmm.
The idea that standards have been lowered to
Mhm.
attract more diverse officers into the force. Okay. Now, this becomes really problematic because in January of 2023, Matt Parr, who is His Majesty's Inspector of Police and whatever, okay, his responsibility is to assess London's policing. And he repeated this view in an interview he did with the Telegraph, right? And he said that he had seen anecdotal evidence that the Met were recruiting people who were functionally illiterate in English and that this had lowered the standards to make the Met much more representative of the community it serves.
So, and he wasn't saying he hired poor white folks, huh?
No,
That was not the implication.
no, right? Um, I think we have to take in this is the guy that's meant to inspect the police. And these are the views that he's espousing. You're not fit for your job, right? And here's the thing, even if you had seen anecdotal evidence,
Hmm.
bearing in mind your position, that is not something you run off to the newspapers and say.
You do if you're racist, though, let's be honest.
There you go. Well, I mean, look at the publication that he gave his interview to, and that should tell you all you need to know about this
Um,
guy and his politics. The
Sam?
Telegraph.
Oh, Telegraph. Okay.
Okay. Right. Um, so attrition in the Met is a problem. So remember I said about their hiring targets and they won't
Mhm.
be met for 40 years.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right? What Casey finds is that the discrimination is so overwhelming,
Mm.
so sustained that it wears down on police officers. Okay. Black recruits are 26% more likely. Asians are 123% more likely. and mixed race recruits 50% more likely to be subject of a Regulation 13 case. Right? Now, Regulation 13 is the procedure I was talking about in which they get rid of police cadets or in a during the probationary period, they're deemed not to be up to standard or not suitable to be police officers.
So it makes you wonder who exactly they're letting through, huh? You're getting rid of 100 and who percent? Like how is this possible now?
Well, I mean, 126% more likely if you're black and 123% more likely if you're Asian. But you all seem to have rapists running through your police force. So I'm like, what exactly are the criteria for your weeding out? What's the word I want?
So you said weeding out, now I'm at whittling down. What is the
Well,
word?
that's what effectively they are doing. Okay,
trying to find the actual
doing,
appropriate word for
right?
screening process.
Yes, there you go. We'll go with screening. It wasn't the word I was looking for, but we'll go with screening. Yeah. So I mean, just what's your criteria? Because it seems to me that looking at this, the criteria is that paper bag test. They darker than a paper bag, not coming in. Right.
Well, I think we've spoken quite a lot about the fact that, you know, from the recruitment to the management, you know, paper bag test is better than what they're even doing. Huh? It seems as though they are almost deliberately trying to get the most offensive people they can find and employ them within the system. Like that seems to be what they're aiming for. Like, these are the most offensive people that we can find, and they would like to join the Met Police. Let's hire them. And that seems to be the way that, in the end, if you read the whole report, that's the conclusion you come to, is, well, that's the kind of police they hire.
Right. So now we go on. Black and Asian officers raised grievances, and this is in regards to their work and working relationships, at higher levels than their white colleagues. Okay? I mean, it's no surprise. But
no one shocked
black officers raised them at 4 times the rate of white officers. And yet the Met would handle these cases so poorly that in 2016, the Equality and Human Rights Commission published a report into the Met's handling of discrimination cases. And the report found a general reluctance within the Metropolitan Police Service to admit mistakes and apologize for them, along with an inconsistent application of legislation and policy. Let me translate that for you. They did not apply legislation and policy equally to white officers as they did black officers. Okay. So what they're saying now is, hey, if you're black within the police force, if you're Asian within the police force, if you're a woman within the police force, if you're gay or lesbian or transgender within the police force, listen, you are not going to get a fair shake of the whip.
No.
Right? We are not going to protect you by making sure that you are in a healthy working environment.
No, because that would be too much, wouldn't it?
Okay. The misconduct system in the Met tells us a story of discrimination. Okay. So misconduct, according to the Met, is a breach of professional behavior. Right? Now, discriminatory behavior are not included in this. Right? I think you need to understand that. You can discriminate, and that is not regarded as misconduct, according to the Met. Okay. Now, the data for this shows that every year since 2013 to right onwards, Black and Asian officers are more likely to be subjects of misconduct allegations. Right, 81% for Blacks and 55% for Asians. They were also more likely to result in having a case to answer. Right? Now, I want you to think back to what I just quoted a moment ago from the Equality and Human Rights Commission and their report saying there was inconsistent application of legislation and policy. Right? Now, here's the thing. I'm not saying that the cases against these Black and Asian officers were wrong. I'm saying not enough was done in regards to their white colleagues, right? I'm saying to you, listen, I can believe that these officers had a case to answer, but I can also understand them feeling aggrieved for not getting away with the same crap that their colleagues did.
Well, now.
Right? I just want them all gone, right? And so when we look at the fact that these Black and Asian officers are found to be more likely to have a case for answer in regards to misconduct, I need to ask what happened to allow Wayne Couzens to skate by when he was known to his colleagues as the rapist. Right? And then just this week, we got the news report of 6 Met police officers being sacked, right, for homophobic and racist behaviors.
Yep.
Right? In large part, they got sacked because they did it towards the son of somebody who's famous. Let's just be real about this. But the lead instigator, it would appear from the reporting, would be the senior police officer.
Oh, yes.
Right?
And I've now caught which one you're talking about. Oh, my God, that's awful.
Okay. So if if the senior police officers are taking the lead in this discriminatory behavior, what do you expect junior officers to do? Well, to be honest, I know what I expect them to do, but what do I think they're going to do? Those are two different questions, right?
Well, yeah, one would hope that they would actually report, leave, do something. But what they were going to do is they're going to toe the line and act like everyone else, regardless of their feelings.
So now Casey goes on to interpret the data for Black and Asian officers being more likely to be found to have a case to answer as this could be a form of retaliation for officers sticking their head above the parapet and making complaints. This is a way to keep police officers in their place and to discourage other police officers from making complaints, right? And she says, quote, speaking out often results in adverse consequences for the complainant, right? And like me, she's also of the mindset that it's not a matter of there being too many allegations against Black and Asian officers, but that there aren't enough against the white officers.
Because she catalogs the crimes. She's like, they do this and this and this and this and this. So it's not like she's like, we have the evidence. They just don't have anything against them.
Now, we were talking, remember I asked a question to you regarding why is it that the police commissioners don't find the term institutionally racist helpful, but have no problem with the terms institutionally homophobic or institutionally sexist? Well, in her report, Casey finds, in regards to disciplinary procedures, that allegations regarding race and religion were less likely to be found to have a case to answer than any other allegation. Okay. And even when they are, the outcomes are less than satisfactory. Right. She says that she was told time and time again of experiences of racism by officers within the Met towards other officers of color where inappropriate action or worse, no action at all was taken. Okay. So one person said that management are ineffective in dealing with unacceptable behavior. Our discipline process is too bureaucratic and certain behaviors should lead to automatic dismissal. A standard needs to be set and should be high in order that professionalism is brought back into policing. Management action is consistently used to deal with racist incidents when officers should be fired. Now, what they mean by management action is that, oh, I will speak to them. They might have to attend a 2-day racial sensitivity training. You know, all sorts of things like this, right?
The silliness of it all.
We're just going to let you to carry on because I already told you that when officers had to attend training courses that were online, one officer would attend and click the answers for the whole class. So essentially, nobody is going to these training courses, right? Yeah. Another police officer of color recounts, I have been stopped and asked for ID on multiple occasions inside police stations. I understand the need for security, but the amount is abnormal, right? He had been mistaken for a prisoner despite being in suits on numerous occasions.
No, they're just enjoying harassing you. I'm sorry.
On one occasion,
we live in the 21st century.
They're just actually reviewed by an inspector in custody who thought he was a prisoner he had to complete a police and criminal evidence review on. Right? Another officer said, a lot of officers are coming in who are not from London. There's a problem. You're not representative or understanding of the community you're policing. So you can't do it by consent. None of them have been stopped and searched in their lives. I was stopped and searched 50 times before I joined. And I bet you he's probably only 21.
Well, we've seen some horrific cases, huh?
Right. Black female officer who was with a more senior officer when they intercepted a white female member of the public buying drugs from a black person. The senior officer called the white woman an N-lover and a dirty woman.
How are we there? How is this a thing?
I'm sorry, this is just me. And I could be at work. I don't care if a police officer or not. But that word leaves your mouth. We scrapping in the street.
Yeah. I mean, the mind boggles. Anyway, let's hit some other points before we round off.
But I'm just like, anyway, yeah. Okay. Well, actually, I actually do want to stick on this actually. Because only 18% of black officers at the Met think everyone is treated fairly, regardless of race. 63% of white officers think everyone is treated fairly, regardless of race.
Oh, we're so surprised about those numbers, huh?
Well, actually, I am actually pretty surprised that it isn't higher, because what that does say is that actually a large percentage of white officers know that racism is a problem,
Mm,
right?
mm.
But nothing's changing once again because it's not a bug,
It's
right?
a feature of the system.
But what I want to speak to actually in this is actually when you consider that everyone there, or the overwhelming majority of black police officers do not believe that they're being treated fairly. When
Mhm,
they are witnessing racism on a daily basis, subjected to racism on a daily basis,
mhm,
um, see the over policing of people that look like them on a
mhm,
daily basis, see the under protection on a daily basis. I think
mhm.
one of the things that we're not speaking to actually is community trauma,
Yep, that is a thing.
right?
Sadly, it is.
And the effects that community trauma have on
Mm, mm,
them. And one of the things is people don't die in police custody in as high a number as they do in the States.
mm, mm,
But a statistical breakdown reveals that the black people and people of color die at disproportionate numbers
mm, mm,
comparable
mm,
to what's happening in the US. You know, so when I speak of this community trauma, I'm talking about the fact that those in power are effectively
mhm,
being allowed to treat you any
mhm,
way they can, any
mhm,
way they want. They can
mhm,
kill you with impunity because police officers are very, very, very rarely charged for things that they do.
mhm, mhm,
do.
mhm,
Um, you had the case, and it wasn't a black guy that they did it to, the white guy, Ian Tomlinson,
mhm. Oh,
right? And they literally killed the guy.
yeah, yeah.
It was video evidence. There was no need for it, and they walked away scot-free.
Mhm, mhm,
Right?
mhm,
So, I think we need to address the community trauma that is taking place,
mm,
okay?
mm,
And then you have these black police officers that then have to go live within their communities. So you're now sending traumatized people
mhm,
in the communities.
mhm,
These
mhm,
people are not just inflicting trauma in their professional lives, they're going to inflict the trauma in their personal lives,
mm,
right? And of course, what's that going to do to the community, right? Because I mean, you're sending these people into their communities traumatized. We've already spoken about the fact that when police officers are the perpetrators of domestic violence, that the old boys club rallies around them,
mhm, mhm, mhm,
all of these things.
mhm,
So now we're talking about community trauma, and we're
mm,
happy to talk about community traumas in other aspects,
mhm, mhm,
and I think they're right to do so. But considering the makeup of the Metropolitan Police
mm,
and the makeup of London,
mm,
I don't think it's unfair to describe the Metropolitan Police as an occupying force.
mm, 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 mm. Yeah.
And one of the things that Casey says is that they have lost the ability to police by consent. They are no
Yes.
longer policing by consent.
Yes.
If you are not policing by consent, you do
Mhm,
not come from the area and the community,
mhm,
then
mhm.
you are essentially an occupying force,
Indeed.
right? And so we not now need to start looking at the psychology of occupying forces and
Mhm, mhm,
occupied people.
mhm, mm.
An occupying force must be more harsh than it needs to be
Yeah.
because it is smaller and does not have the consent and will of the people in order to maintain control.
Mm, 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 mm.
So then how does this then affect policing
Mhm, mhm,
if we're dealing with the psychologies of occupying force and occupied
mhm,
people? And I
mhm,
don't believe these questions are being asked in regards to what's happening in London.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm watching the time. I know.
Well, there's a lot of details, and I think that, you know, we obviously, if we were going to do a series of lectures in which somebody really wanted to unpack some of these issues, I think it's important. But I do think in the interest of what we do, which is to expose people to different reports, different ideas, different points of view, to look at the dark side of these issues. When it comes to the Met Police, one of the overarching things that really strikes me about the report is that this institutional failure is pervasive within all aspects of the organization. So we can go on and discuss at length the fact that they don't identify with their terms, whatever. The fact of the matter is that if in one area you're seeing a problem, so let's say the most obvious problem that they have is that everyone will know is that stop and search powers are abused. It is, I forget the percentage, more likely to be used on a person of color, a black young male, than any other demographic. And you're talking about 80% of all people that are stopped and searched are from young black male. When we talk about offending rates, however, when we talk about actual convictions and offending rates, the statistic doesn't bear out the reasons why you're stopping and searching. So this is just one aspect where you have the problem. But what the report highlights, and what Casey's report highlights, is that problem is the outworking of an entire institutional failure.
Right.
It isn't just stop and search as an issue. You have to go all the way back in the organization to the management, the implementation, the recruitment, the hiring process, the way that even the units are given freedom or not freedom, where the units are placed, all of it, the geography, the whole thing is so problematic that to deal with stop and search, one issue, yes, we can change the law.
I actually want to give some statistics on stop and search since you mentioned it, actually, because I think it's important for people to understand the enormity of the problem of stop and search. Okay. So in every year since 2016 onwards, those between 11 and 61 who appear to be black have been at least 3.5 times more likely to be stopped and searched by the Met than the white counterparts. However, this pales into insignificance when you understand that in 2015, 1 in 4 black males aged between 15 and 24 in London were stopped and searched within a 3-month period.
A quarter of the black male population. That's what you just said.
Yep. Okay.
In 3 months.
This is broadly the same level of disproportionality that was mentioned in the Macpherson report.
Yes, indeed.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Casey goes on, and I'm going to give you a direct quote. Figures like these are neither new nor unreported. In other words, people, this is well known. She goes on to say, enough evidence and analysis exists to confidently label stop and search as a racialized tool. In other words, she's saying that stop and search, the evidence exists that you can say with confidence that this is a tool designed, aimed, and used against people of color.
Yeah.
It does not have another purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. I, as I said, I think the conclusion for me reading the report, listening to the points that you're bringing across, is if you read this report, if you actually look at the actual statistics, I met someone today who said they're only concerned with facts. If you look at the facts of the case and you do not conclude that it is institutionally a problem, this is a systematic and systemic issue. They are systematically doing this. This is not by accident. There is intention. It is systemic in that it is inbred within the organization to be racist, sexist, homophobic, to protect predators, to enable violence against local communities. If you don't see that, then you need to ask yourself serious questions about how you are viewing the world. And I think that that's something that we need to assess. You know, we can talk about all of the anecdotal evidence that we can put forward as individuals of what we have lived and seen, having been subjected to the Met Police over the time that we have lived and breathed in London. But the reality is that pales into comparison when you look at the institutional failings. And I think that Casey speaks eloquently and with passion about the fact that she has embedded herself. This is not, let's just take the numbers and go at face value. She listened to people's stories. She was part of departments. She went in where people have not gone in before and sat in spaces and became part of the institution to truly understand it. And her conclusion is not protect the institution, it's burn the building, right? It's this has to reform in 5 years or else we need to shut it down, because this is not the way to police at all. You know, in any fundamental understanding of policing, this wouldn't be it. And I would hope that our viewers, after hearing the kind of three-pronged approach that we've taken of looking fairly at what some of the issues are in terms of conservative governance and how austerity, etc., has impacted the police, but how we've actually looked at the problems that have been highlighted from McPherson, you know, over the last 20 years to this report, that you can honestly say, if you are not looking at this as a problem, if you're not assessing the challenges, then you need to take a really deep, hard look and see how much racism has seriously impacted your ability to see and to be compassionate. That can be the only thing.
I think I would add to this, I was going to say Tory voters in the UK, but actually I think this goes to conservatives and right-wing people. Why is it that when people seeking social justice say to defund the police, you get upset? But when in the UK, Tory governments defund the police, as we have outlaid in the Metropolitan, in Casey's report, okay, do you still continue to vote these people in? You seem so opposed to defunding the police because we need them. But when your right-wing leaning government defunds the police, you're silent at best. And at worst, you are vocal in your support for them. And in regards to the US, when you have people in the US saying defund the police in a quest for social justice and police reform, you get upset. But when the police defund themselves, as they did in the news story that I mentioned earlier on, regarding the Homeland Security officer, in which he wins $750,000 that comes out of the police budget, why are you not upset that the police continue to keep these police officers on? Because they are effectively defunding the police. And because you keep increasing the police budgets, there is no incentive to get rid of these bad officers. But everybody who wants to say it's a few bad apples, well, guess what? You need to clear the barrel out at some point. You don't just keep chucking new apples into a barrel of bad apples. Otherwise, everything will spoil. But it seems to me that this concept of defunding the police only meets opposition in regards to the idea that it should be more equitable and just in its treatment of minorities and people of color.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I completely support what you said. And I guess in conclusion, to take it even to another step, which is violence against any group allows violence against all people.
Okay. We've got a question. We've got a comment here from Avril Abel. The commissioner has complained that he doesn't have sufficient power to be able to deal efficiently with the number of officers that need to be sacked. With this in mind, can we expect anything to change? At the beginning of the program, I said that I think Casey pretty much laid out that she's of the mindset of scrap it and start again. And I am of the same mindset, scrap it and start again. I believe that if you try to reform the system, you won't achieve change. It's like it's sometimes cheaper to pull a house down and build a whole new house than it is to refurb a house. And I think we're facing the same problem with the Metropolitan Police. So the question would then be, where do you get the numbers that you need to begin a new police system from? I think that when you look at the Met Police system, there are enough officers there for you to vet and vet effectively to bring through a structure and a system and knowledge and expertise to begin a new policing system. And if you vet those effectively, bring those into the new system, and then hire new officers and add that to the new system, then I think you would be able to establish something. But in terms of reform in its current guise, I don't expect anything to change. And to be honest, I don't expect anything to change. I know the Met Commissioner is saying that he doesn't have sufficient power. I think it goes more, not so much to that he doesn't have sufficient power. He lacks the courage to make the changes necessary, and he lacks belief that these changes are actually necessary. And I say that based on his consistent stance that he does not find the term institutionally racist helpful, despite now we have 2 official reports saying that it's institutionally racist from the government. The Met have had their own reports finding themselves racist, but they say, hey, it's just this police station, that police station, and this police station, that police station. You know, that nothing will change. He doesn't believe it needs to change, and he doesn't see the real problem. And I think, for me, those are the real reasons why we won't see change.
Yeah, I think earlier at the top of the show, the only thing I would add is that the Met Police commissioner is on record as basically saying this isn't an issue of whether he has or does not have power. He doesn't see this as an issue. And if you don't see this, I fundamentally said at the beginning, if you don't see this as an institutionally a problem, including yourself, then you will never change anything. And just like his predecessor didn't, so he is going down the same route. So the idea that he doesn't have enough power to deal with it, I think, is a misnomer. In fact, is just an excuse for he's putting on a pretense that he actually would do anything should more power be available. under what circumstances is more power available? What is he actually referring to? I think it's a deflection tactic. I don't have the power to deal with the amount of problems that we have to sack all of those officers. And the question would be, so what power do you need in order to do that? Let's challenge that narrative from the beginning. What is it that you're looking for? Because the way that you're making it sound is the volume of officers should be sacked is so large that you're almost indicating that you'd have no police force left or something of that magnitude. If you know that, then why don't you do anything? What is the power you're seeking?
I think
that's problematic. I think his deflection is problematic.
His deflection is very problematic. And I think when he says he doesn't have power, I think it's in the same context that Theresa May said that she couldn't bring about the necessary reforms to the Metropolitan Police. It's not that you don't have the ability to do so. It's that you won't remain in your job and role if you do so. You don't have the power in that sense to bring about the change. And I think what the Met should have done, rather than appoint a commissioner, is actually appoint a crisis manager. Somebody who's going to come in for a short term, make the necessary cuts and changes, is not worried about popularity, is not worried about their job or position at the end of the day. They simply have a role and a task to fulfill, and then they're out the door. Because as it stands, the commissioner is trying to keep leadership happy. They're trying to keep rank and file happy. They're trying to keep everybody happy. And in order to keep everybody happy, nothing can change.
So yeah, so expecting change, is a very difficult one to deal with. I think, the reason we do this show and so many others episodes that we've done is really to remind people that they have the power to vote and to change things. You have the power to work within your local community, to vote in leadership that has the ability to impact directly the lives of those people impacted by the police. And if you continue to not vote, continue to not participate in the system, continue to say, well, it's all the same, when it's clearly not all the same. It's not all the same. People say, well, we have these people are bad, but the other people are bad too. No. At some point, you have to take a side. You have to stand and say, this is wrong. And I'm picking the side of this is right. And we can hold them to account.
Look, I'm okay if people want to say that they're all the same. I'm actually okay with that, because you can talk about the outcome is all the same. They're going to screw you over, right? In that case, they're all the same. The question is with or without Vaseline.
Yeah, see, for me, I'm not okay with that, because it makes it sound like somebody who, okay, let's take the examples we're talking about today. They're not all the same. Wayne Couzens was not the same. He was known as the rapist. You guys knew this is not the same. You cannot stand and say these are the same. No, these are wrong. It's wrong. He's not like us as police officers. He's not like those good officers. There's not a few bad apples. It is not the same. These people are willfully doing the wrong thing. And to just go, well, there's some other bad people too. Are they raping and murdering women? Are they stopping and searching black people and harassing? Is that what they're doing? No, they are wrong, and wrong is wrong. And in the end, while you might say, I don't agree with all of your policies, or I don't agree with this, fair enough. They may have some things that you don't like. Absolutely. But when it comes to issues of people's life and death, they're not all the same.
Right.
This is like the polarization in the USA. Oh, but there are bad people on both sides. Excuse me. Which are the bad people locking children up in cages? We don't vote for people like that. That's not what we support. That's not how we stand for it. Like, yes, these people might not be perfect, but they certainly aren't doing this. And we should at some point draw a line and say, you know what? I don't stand for that. And I just, yeah. So for me, that sentiment doesn't work, because it just says I'm not participating because, well, there's half a dozen of one, six of the other.
No, That's not what I said, though. I said if you want to arrive at the conclusion that they're all the same, that's fine.
Yes, I heard
Because
what you said. I was explaining
the
my
destination's the same. The
no, but
destination
I
is the
was
same.
explaining my position. I wasn't talking about I understood what you said. I said I have a problem with it. I didn't say you said that. I said
Okay.
I have a problem with the statement. I was very clear. And I think that when we do these shows, it is with the sole purpose of trying to activate people to participate in their own community. Whatever wherever you are and what your community is, get up and participate.
No,
Don't
absolutely. I'm not saying don't participate.
Yeah, no, we're not. That's what I'm saying. The purpose we do this with is with that view. Don't pretend that you can just go la la la, not listening. It's okay. It doesn't affect me. Which goes back to the point that I wanted to make, which is in the Met Police. If you ever wanted evidence that if you accept violence against anyone, it is violence against all of us. The Met Police is that. They were found institutionally racist. Now, all of these other problems probably existed at that point, but everyone turned a blind eye, did nothing for how many years? We have this report, which now says this isn't just about racism, it's about violence against women, it's about violence against children, it's about violence against homosexuals and LGBTQIA people. This is about you've allowed violence against Black people, which has opened the door to the dehumanization of all people. Violence anywhere, dehumanization of a person anywhere allows you to disassociate and dehumanize anybody. And this is a continual problem that we see in this world. And I think that this report is the perfect example to say to people, we started with one thing, and because we have accepted it, the problem has exacerbated to flooding the whole system of every type of possible crime you can think of. Now the police are in everything. And because you're excusing this one, you're allowing them to get away with everything else. And that is why we have to stand against it, in my opinion. This is why you must read the report. This is why you have to listen to these things. This is why you have to participate. Because if you don't, you're allowing this. You're complicit. Anyway, that's my little bee in my bonnet after today's show. You conclude with something nice. I'm gonna stop.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I'm just gonna go back to stop and search, and then you can shut up shop. I am fiercely opposed to stop and search as a tactic. And I think one of the problems regarding stop and search in London is that we have allowed a narrative and a myth to build up regarding violence and knife crime. And it's not that it doesn't happen, but I think it's important to note that similar problems existed in Glasgow, right? A couple of decades ago, and they did not solve the problem through policing. They solved the problem by investing in communities, by opening up youth centers, by addressing the social ills of the community. And in doing so, they cut down a lot of violence and drug problems that they had in Glasgow. So stop and search is already known within the UK not to be an effective tool to address violence and drug crimes. And I think the other thing to bear in mind is that we have allowed the narrative to build up around stop and search and say, hey, it's to stop knife crime, it's to protect Black communities. Well, I'm sorry, it's not just Black youth that are stabbing people, right? No. So it's disproportionate use doesn't make sense. No. But also, if the idea is that you're using it as a tool to stop violent crimes, to stop knife crime, then let me ask you this one question, if you support it. Why is the Misuse of Drugs Act by far the number one reason given for a stop and search? If your true aim is to stop knife crime, Why are you saying I'm stopping you because I think you might have drugs on you?
Well, there you go. Says all the biased nonsense that it needs to say, doesn't it? Yeah. Well, I want to thank everyone who has been with us and who watches the show. Thank you for your support. We have one more episode before we break for a 2-week break, and then we are into the final weeks of season 5. Can you believe it? We've been doing this a while now, season 5, before the summer. So thank you very much for your continued support. We do this voluntarily. This is just us and the things that we're passionate about, sharing our knowledge, our education, and mostly, of course, TC Storm's dedicated ability to study, read, and bring across these points to us. Let's highlight and thank him for that. So all help gratefully received in doing this project and others. We'd like to thank you so much. Next week, we will be coming, I think, with a predominantly news-worthy episode, because we have concentrated on this for 3 weeks and so much has happened that there are a few news stories I think we want to cover. So next week, if you have a news story that you'd like us to cover on the dark side, please do let us know. Once again, thank you, Mr. Storm, for reading the report. I know it was a difficult read because it highlighted and gave harrowing details of crimes that are committed both on the general public and to the actual police officers themselves. So thank you for your work and dedication in this area. Let's see each other next week, 9 o'clock here on the dark side. Peace out. Be safe, people. Be safe. See you soon. Bye-bye. Have a good one. Bye.